GM, welcome back to another episode of Web3 Academy, your one trusted source to capitalize on the next big phase of the internet. Don't get caught in the hype cycle. I'm Jay Bird, and I believe that the future of work is on-chain. That's why I'm carving a path for doers to confidently build and invest in Web3. Welcome to another awesome doer spotlight. Today, we have joining us on the show Pedro Oliveira from Talent Protocol. This is a awesome conversation with a multiple time startup founder. Pedro has been a startup founder in Web2, starting one of the leading jobs tech platforms in Europe, landing.jobs, and now moving over into Web3, he started Talent Protocol. And Pedro is not shy to be vulnerable, which is why I truly love this episode. Finding product market fit, finding the magic sauce that can make a business soar and a business fly is not easy. And Pedro's very straight up about that. He knows that Talent Protocol has been successful. They've raised over $3 million. They have 5,000 monthly active users. They have an incredible scholarship program, which has put many people through hackathons. Many of their scholarship winners have won hackathons. So they've had great success, but they haven't reached the peak. They haven't reached where Pedro knows they can be. And this episode is all about what it's like to be a builder and to try to figure it out. It's not always simple. We always talk about the stories of, the friend tech, where they came out of nowhere, they caught the attention of everybody, and boom, they set off like a rocket ship. Well, you know what? Most businesses aren't built like that. They're built in the trenches. They're built through the bull market, through the bear market, and they're built by people who consistently show up over and over again. And that's what this episode is all about. It's all about the story of a founder and a business that is working it out day by day, that has tried different things, that is experimenting, that has moved from one chain to another chain, and that through it all continues to grow and continues to provide a product that really matters, but they're not afraid to experiment. Pedro also tells some awesome stories, one in particular about how they almost lost 25% of their treasury in one day in the Luna crash. He tells us what happened there. And he also talks about how they've made some mistakes in the transitions and the experiments that they've made. He's not shy to say some of their mistakes led them to maybe make more revenue, but sacrifice some of their partners and lose some partners along the way because it made them lose focus on what the core mission was. He also talks about a lot of lessons that he learned in the bull market that he thought would be things that would continue on forever. But then once the bear market happened, he realized that those things were not sustainable and not long-term. And it's really taught him and his team a lot about the business and how you need to operate with a bear market mentality, because things are always optimistic, rose-colored glasses. Everything is sunshine and rainbows in the bull market. Well, that changes when we get to a bear market, and he talks about what that is like to manage. This is just truly a episode that is for any builder, any founder, anybody who's deep in building and creating in Web3, whether you're a big part of a team or a small part of a team. This is the episode you want to listen to, because this is the truth and vulnerability that we need to hear more of, that we need more of these stories of people talking about what it's like to work through the trenches. So let's jump in and hear from Pedro. Before we do, we'll just take a minute to hear from our sponsor. Modern newsletters are built on Paragraph. That's right. Paragraph is a brand new newsletter platform that combines the best parts of Web 2 and Web 3 to supercharge newsletters for both writers and readers. Build a community, not just an audience. Paragraph uses blockchain tech to allow readers to collect and own the words that matter to them. This takes reading a newsletter to the next level. With Paragraph, readers can mint, collect, and show off quotes from their favorite newsletters. This opens new possibilities like creators sharing revenue with fans. I also love their new feature, Paragraph AI. This integrates GPT-4 natively in Paragraph to create, edit, and improve your writing effortlessly with one click. And guess what? We at Web3 Academy are on board and have already moved our content over to Paragraph. We believe this is the future of newsletters because of the profound engagement it creates between creators and fans. So, whether you're a creator, writer, or an avid reader, it's time to check out Paragraph and capitalize on the opportunity of being early. GM Pedro, welcome to Web3 Academy. So excited to have you today.
Hey, how's it going, Jay? Thanks for having me.
Let's start at, I don't want to go all the way back to the beginning of your career, but I'm sure at some point during this episode, we will bring up your experience throughout talent tech, basically. But I want to start back at the beginning and the origin of Talent Protocol. So you started in 2021. Since then, incredible achievements. You've built Talent Protocol into 5,000 monthly active users. You launched a scholarship program called Takeoff. You raised $3 million in the bull market. We'll talk about that. You expanded to Polygon, initially launching on Cello. You then launched an NFT, PFP collection called Talent Mates, and maybe slowly decentralizing yourself into a DAO, although we'll talk about your exact structure. You've done so much, but before we talk about sort of what you've built and what is Talent Protocol, I always like to hear sort of the reason or the light bulb moment that went off in a founder's head of, this is your fourth startup, right? You could have probably gone and done many different things. What did you see about Web3, about blockchain? What was it that made you say, oh, this is the idea I want to chase after? And maybe what were those founding beliefs or thoughts that you had?
All right, so lots of questions in there, but I'll kind of give you a deep dive into the thought process that brought me there. First of all, like my ethos, my reason for work, I've been lucky enough to find it. So I love building products that help people find their purpose or be more productive at work. I think those two combined generate human wealth. I kind of figured out early on in my career what I wanted to be focused on. I worked like almost 10 years in my previous startup called Landing Jobs, which is a tech recruitment marketplace. Biggest one in Portugal, one of the largest in Europe. And in essence, that was my HR technology pill. That's how I got into the space. I've done a few things before that, but that was my intro into the HR tech space. And after those 10 years, it was just like a lot, grinding those years, including a move to London pre-Brexit and coming back to Lisbon post-Brexit. So a lot of stories in there. We could do a podcast just on that one. I took like a sabbatical. It was supposed to be a 12-month sabbatical. And again, it is like end of 2020. So we are full-blown into COVID, life-changing moment for many people on this planet, including myself. And I decided, okay, it's time to take some time off, just learn, go, stop being on focus mode, go into diffuse mode. And I think sabbaticals are great for that. So it wasn't just a time off. I had the learning plan, I had the accountability buddy, all that. I really planned that. Maybe you can put on the show notes, but there's a really cool site like Learning Sabbatical, where, we can just plan out, there's a framework to plan out your sabbatical. Unfortunately, it wasn't a 12-month sabbatical as I wished. It was only a 3-month sabbatical. I learned a bunch of things that I wanted to learn for a long time, but you just don't have the mind space to go into things like psychology. I dived deeper into blockchain. I've been in the space mostly as like a user, a trader, if you wish, and not really a builder. But I was always curious, being in the HR tech space, there weren't many startups, many founders, using blockchain. It just didn't make sense for me. So I decided to go deeper on that tech. To my surprise, then I bumped into Web3. So this is early 2021. We're not in the peak bull market yet, but there's a lot of excitement in the space. So I started talking to a lot of people, and I think there was a moment. I forget we can say I'm a fan of the All In podcast. I'm a viewer. It's better than saying I'm a fan. I'm a viewer of their podcast. There was an episode when they were discussing, just trends in Web3 in particular, how it was going to change society. And there was something they said about decentralizing debt. And then one of them said decentralizing careers. And that kind of that was the light bulb moment you were asking me about. That's when I realized, I had always, throughout my career, I always thought there should be a way for people to be, more vested into each other's career. That is like bullseye into the vision, the ethos of talent protocol, where talent in this world has always been revenue-driven, employer-driven, transactional-driven. I think we should move away from that into where talent should be really, which is ownership-driven. When you work for someone, you're working for yourself. You should have stake on whether it's talent, organizations, DAOs, doesn't really matter, but we should evolve into something that is better for talent. I think, in a nutshell, I think talent is the most underutilized asset in the world by far. Talent is truly decentralized. That's a reality.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that opportunity isn't. And so talent protocol is essentially we try to change things, how things work in this place. It started like that. As you mentioned, things have evolved. We've launched a bunch of stuff. And, like all startups, I've seen previous episodes in your podcast where, the founders, things change. And it happened to us as well. So it's been 2 years now. And the way we started is not where we are now. And I'm pretty sure it's not where we're going to be 2 years from now. So
it's probably one of the biggest misconceptions that I think people have outside of a business is you look at a business and typically you don't find out about a business until they're successful. And you think, oh, these guys have always been successful. They always knew what they were doing. It must have been the plan from the beginning. But it's usually not the case. The way that you actually succeed is you experiment, you try things, and you make mistakes. Some work out, some don't work out. And eventually you grow into the end product, the end use case that actually solves a problem for your users. Where are you right now? Can you tell us a little bit about what is the product right now? Maybe give us some examples of some users and how they're using Talent Protocol.
Yeah, so the platform has evolved into a place where people can commit publicly to goals. They can share their progress with their supporters and, involve these supporters into helping them achieve those goals. It's both a social fight. It's a social fight platform because there's this social part and an economic part where we reward users. So this rewarding part is with our token. We call it TAL, which hasn't been launched yet. So if you go on talentprotocol.com, you can set your profile. Not only it's good for showcasing your talent, but also it's more focused on the future. If you go on LinkedIn and other platforms, it's always focused on best. We try to let's focus on the future. Because your career is a collection of your goals. If they were achieved or not, or abandoned, sometimes they stop making sense. Who helped you throughout the way? And again, what I mentioned in the beginning, there should be a way for talent to be vested in each other. We think that goals are, in essence, the atom of everything. All the work that we do starts with the goal. Sometimes you don't know what the goal is. That's okay. We also help you with that. We have some AI support as well. We're all humans. As goals are not, they're endless, but there's patterns in the goals that we have. Have a kid, buy a house, start a new startup, build a new product. There's a lot of similarities between our purposes. So that's what it is nowadays. We're now making a new experiment, and just want to double down on your comment. I think when you start something, you have this thing we call runway. All right. So it's almost like how much time, how much money you got until you're done and you can't experiment anymore. I think it's the main thing that a startup founder CEO should do is like make sure that with limited resources that you have, you make as many experiences as you can. Mm-hmm. It's tricky because you may find yourself in a situation where you do too many of them in parallel. It's a balance. You need to balance things out in here. So in essence, Talent Protocol is that, and there's this new experiment we're running, which is for our takeoff program, so our scholarship program, to take Web3 undiscovered talent to their first Web3 hackathon IRL. And we're doing this for Istanbul, Dev Connect, coming in November. I don't know the exact date, sorry. And in essence, we're going to do a voting system that uses almost like a betting pool where people can vote retail on the applicants, on the scholars applicants, and the winners in the end. So if you bet it on the right person, you'll get more talent back. So we're making some experiments with the token utility as well. I don't think we're ready to go public with the token. So effectively doing the token launch, I think we need to do some more experiences, have a bit more working. If we were in a bull market, though, the conversation would have been very different. I think you can make a lot more mistakes in a bull market. It's so much easier. It's such a more optimistic context. And things just tend to go better in a way. But to answer your question, go on Talent Protocol and, set up your goals, start collaborating with each other, commit publicly, make career updates. So we see a lot of people tweeting about this, just sharing and keeping themselves accountable. In a weird way, when I did my sabbatical, I was doing this, but it wasn't publicly. I was very, I had this mental framework, things that I wanted to do. But in a way, it was related to this. So actually, one of my goals on Talent Protocol is to get back to my sabbatical in 2-3 years' time. The rest of the 9 months, hopefully I can do the 9 months and not start something else.
That's a good. If you get there, then that means Talent Protocol has succeeded, which is probably why part of the reason why you want to decentralize. Not only for the reasons of your belief in Web3 and the power of decentralization, but also that will allow you to maybe step back and take your sabbatical again. Okay, there's a bunch of things there I kind of want to unpack. I definitely want to talk about the scholarship program and Takeoff because I know this is its 9th season, I think, 8th or 9th season that you're going into.
So just to clarify on that one. So the Takeoff is the 9th or 10th edition. So the last one was at ECC Paris. We brought like 10 brilliant minds to the first hackathon, life-changing moment. And now we're doing it with 15 other people. Luckily, we were sponsored by the crews at Protocol Labs, Cello Foundation, and Cello Europe DAO as well. That has helped us, come up with the monies to support this.
So the way the scholarship program works is anybody can apply. If you are chosen, you get paid access to ECC or a major hackathon.
Yeah. So you get your flights covered, stay as well, some beer money, and tickets as well. So usually the hackathon events, they offer tickets for our scholars because it's such a social impact thing, right? It's what I said at the beginning. Talent is the most underutilized asset in the world. So people see value in this. Organizations see value in this, and communities are seeing value.
And who are the applicants? What's their experience level? What are they bringing to the table?
Yeah, mostly it's like students, usually university students who are wrapping things up at uni, but it's not exclusive. Sometimes it's someone just start working in Web3 or collaborating with DAOs. There's a lot of diversity on that front. It's hard to make a pattern, but if I had to risk, I would say students. And then on the regions side of things, it really depends on where the next one is going to be. So we tend to Sometimes we bring people from around the world, but usually it's people from around the region. So if we're doing in Europe, okay, let's bring from around Europe. The next one is in Turkey, okay, let's bring from around Turkey. It's just we found out that it makes it easier for post takeoff collaboration. So when they set up their goals on talent protocol, all that, it just makes it easier for people to keep in touch, to collaborate if they are from closer locations. But it's not something set in stone. We also keep we're experimenting with the takeoff program, same thing as we do with talent.
Right. Okay. I want to just touch on Tau quickly, the token, because I want our viewers and listeners to understand the current situation of Tau, that it's not yet a launched token, but that you are using in your ecosystem. I think there's some nuance there that people need to appreciate and understand how that works, because I think most people, they see a token and they think, oh, it must be a fully liquid token. Can you explain sort of like where it's at now, how it's used now, and more focus on the token, less on like how it's used, and then maybe get into what will happen when you launch it and what changes in its current state versus its state once it is ICO'd or launched?
Sure. So when we first raised sets were all the rage. They so simple agreement on future tokens, which is a model that is a Web3 copycat of a safe, simple agreement on future equity from the Web3 space, right? And it was all the rage back then. Again, bull market. We're trying to build Talent Protocol as a crypto native startup. So no equity, no shares. The core team, the core contributors getting paid in stables and tokens or future tokens in this case. So that's kind of like the baseline for funding this venture, right? So you can see this is public information in our token distribution. Things might change a little bit, but we committed 12% of TAL to private investors. We put like 45% to community incentives from out of those throughout season 1, 2, 3. We mentioned that takeoff program, its edition, so we are on the 9th test. On the talent protocol side, we work in seasons. So seasons are a specific period of time where we do a lot of experiments.
And how long is typically a season?
Typically 6 months. Now we kind of established that 6 months is the right period. Before it used to be like 9 or longer, but 6 months it's working better for us. So throughout season 1, so roughly November 2021 until season 3, which ended a couple months ago, so in June 2023, we experimented with TAL. Okay, so we had this social economics where you could buy someone's TAL tokens, almost like to say shares. There's not the approximate, but to say shares with a lot of quotes in it. So you buy someone's tokens, and that would be you investing into someone. So you having a stake into someone. The only way for you to do that is if you buy TAL. And that was the main agility of TAL Protocol for a long time. We gave incentives by, when you do that, you'd actually be staking TAL. So we're giving both the supporter and the talent daily rewards for this. So it would be a way for people also to be collectively invested into Talent Protocol, to be part of the community. We would say, this catchphrase, success is collective. And that was the main mantra behind season 1, 2, 3. And at the start, it was going super well. Still a bull market. And bull markets had this thing, they can be illusions. Some things you think you have a business model, they do not. And that's what we realized. Wish that I'd done it sooner. And maybe we'll talk about legacy and dealing with legacy later.
Yeah.
But we realized wasn't really working. That's why we're doing new experiments with TAL. And, because takeoff is the most successful product that we've launched into the market. People love it. It's like there's no one who's being part of it doesn't love it. Our alumni community is amazing. And we're now trying to join the token with that. The token remains unlaunched, but one of the things that we built, and this makes our life very easy in terms of experimentation, is we now have virtual TAL. So if you go on TAL protocol, it's almost like abstraction. So you go on TAL protocol, you can already earn and use TAL in there. It's almost like private economy. It's really interesting because it allows us to learn so much about it. And yeah, that's in a nutshell what happened to TAL as a token. It's really hard to dissociate the market side of the token with the utility side of the token, but because they go together, they're part of the same thing.
Let me just ask a clarifying question there. So you call it virtual TAL right now.
Yeah.
Am I buying it? Is it a fungible token right now, or is it just a more of like Web 2 point system?
Yeah, it's still a Web 2 point system, so you cannot really have the token in your wallet yet.
Right.
There's been some other protocols doing interesting stuff on that front, like Safe. So they within the TGE where they distributed the token, but with no financial value. So it's fungible, but no financial value yet. Only when they do the TTE, so token transferability events, that it will have, like, so the actual token launch, then it will have real financial value. So in our case, it's still pretty much Web 2. We have the smart contracts, both of them are audit, you can check them, but the control is with the core team. So I'd say mix between Web 2 and Web 3. In terms of the token launch itself, so like looking into the future, we still haven't decided on the best way to do it. That's something that changed a lot. Doing a token launch 2 years ago is not the same. It's not precisely the same thing as doing one now. So we're still trying to understand what changed, what didn't, and how can we execute it so that the community can benefit from it.
It's really interesting, and I think that there's been other examples, as you mentioned, Safe or Gnosis, where it's very difficult to figure out as you said, both the tokenomics and the utility of your token. And we're seeing this right now, a lot of Web3 businesses launched a token during the bull run. And sure, they did great during the bull run, but now in a bear market, they have gotten wiped out and your token value goes to zero or goes very low. And that affects your entire business, and you're not prepared for that. And maybe you haven't yet figured out the utility. So you realize, oh, wait, there isn't enough utility. So everyone just sells out because there's no reason to hold that token. It's interesting to think about, I think. And I think that a lot of founders would benefit from this model. I'm curious if you would advise us as well of start with this maybe more Web 2 point system to experiment, to see what makes people want those points, what makes people keep them and use them, and then expand to a fully fungible token within a liquid market.
I think that model works. So combination of the two, I think you still should keep things fairly abstracted, but also having this Web3 framework behind it so that people really, they can see that the value is there. So it's not only in your servers and trust me, bro, that's not the point. So they can see, okay, there's the smart contracts, things are happening on chain, but there's an abstraction layer. And I think, talking about abstraction, I think that's like probably where Web3 has evolved the most in the last couple of years, like for real. Like I think we are at the point where, and going into to answer your question, I think it should feel like Web 2, but it's Web 2. Yeah, so that's the way I think we should do it. As for the token launch itself, you're totally right. I know a lot of projects like that. You know what? If some things didn't happen like they did, we'd probably be one of those. Because the leading through a bull, and probably a lot of the viewers of Web3 Academy will get this because they went through it as well. But for those who didn't, going through it there's such a aura of optimism. Everything works. You're going down the street, you kick a stone, and opportunities appear. Like it's just so easy. And it's also so easy to fall into the bull trap, and which is thinking you have a business model when it don't, which is thinking that you have token utility when it, again, tokenomics, token utility is super correlated. And this can drive you to launching before you're ready. And I think it happened with a lot of projects that mean well. I'm not talking about those that they were clear rug pulls, there's a lot of that quick turn, unfortunately. But I'm talking about the ones that meant well. They executed in a bull way. And that doesn't work when it's stops being a bull.
I love that you're bringing up this difference between operating in a bull market versus a bear market. Other industries are affected by the swings of the market, but not to the extreme that Web3 is right now, because we're still so small, right? When you're small and there's only, by our calculations, there's about 20 million active wallets per month right now. And a good percentage of those are just using stable coins. Probably like 25% of those are just using stable coins, and that is their pure use case. So you're talking about a very small, and my numbers are usually optimistic. Somebody else might come in and say the number's much less than that, but you're talking about a very small market. And so you are more in a small market, you're much more impacted by swings. What has it been like for you? You mentioned business model, the challenges of having a sound business model. It's tough to have a business model in a startup. Usually in the beginning of a startup, you've got an idea of what your business model is, but it can take you, the best example of this is think about the biggest tech companies today. Facebook didn't have a business model for 5-10 years until they figured out that ads were going to be their main thing. For the longest time, they just grew users and they took advantage of building this big attention platform. So I'm curious to talk a little bit about your business model, and you can sort of take this, there's a few directions we could go in. First, we could talk about how the bull market versus the bear market impacted your treasury. Like, I think that's an interesting thing to discuss, because I think that all founders who raised in the bull were then very impacted by the bear. And maybe you can talk about how you navigated that. And then maybe we can lead into more the business model and revenue model.
Yeah, on the treasury front. So I think one big mistake I've seen a lot of founders, and not only founders, but the whole ecosystem pushing people in this direction, including investors. Things are crazy. So now it sounds like crazy, but back then, you have this, you were able to raise this amount. All right, why don't you put this capital working for you, and then you would have limitless runway. So never-ending runway, and that's not real. That doesn't make any sense, right? It's less infinite runway. Doesn't make any sense. Nobody does. I'm just sharing because it's kind of like mindset of some people. And in our case, we part luck, part wisdom. I don't know. Talentberg was my first startup in the Web3 space. It's not my first startup, though. I was always a bit skeptical about this behavior. So we were fortunate enough, like we had 30% of our treasury, or a bit more actually, exposed to this protocol in the Luna ecosystem. It was giving like returns 30% APY, small ways like that, right? And this protocol was called Anchor. Yeah. And I made the decision to remove all of our treasury from it like 3-4 days before the whole Luna crash ecosystem went down. So effectively saving a big chunk of the treasury. Again, part luck, part wisdom. What I felt was like, okay, this is just too much. It's great. It's starting not to make any sense. I was seeing some signals, some things that were, appeared to be bad. And I started to realize, look, this is not my money. This is community money. It's not my job as a CEO to put this money to work. It's my job to keep it safe. job number one, right? And that's what I did. We were lucky again. I know some other startups that weren't, and they effectively went down because of this. So this is not bragging at all. It's just luck / wisdom. And so that's just a story I like to share, because if we go back to a bull, I'm afraid we're going to see new founders and old veteran founders making the same mistakes. It's just so easy to go down that rabbit hole.
First of all, kudos to you. The combo of luck and wisdom, like you said, to 4 days before the lunar crash to pull $700,000 of your treasury out of Anchor and save that money is just, man, like, I don't know who you pray to or what belly you rub or whatever, but man.
Yeah, it was like, I'm glad I did it, and we did it.
But this is the thing about again, this is one of the challenges that Web3, that is unique to Web3 founders and crypto founders, is your treasury is going to be in crypto. And when your treasury is in crypto, you're talking about very volatile assets. And do most founders want to put their entire treasury in stable coins? Probably not, right? No, you're like, well, let's put some of it into some investments. That makes sense. I mean, even a Web2 founder would also have part of their treasury in investment, right? And, so you have that mix, but there is that huge risk right now. And I think that's what you're saying is if you go back, when we go back into a bull run, not if, when we go back into a bull run, you're not necessarily going to get caught up in the greed that so many of us get caught up in when crypto Twitter is going crazy with 30% APY. You're not going to say, oh yeah, let's go after that, because that is not the best use of your time, but also the risk outweighs the gain.
Again, easier said than done. The incentive is so interesting, right? I mean, what if you could have 12 extra months of revenue, or whatever the amount. And sometimes, people just want more, and it's fine. It's a very human reaction, but so is learning. And I think this podcast, Web3 Academy, is all about learning. That's why we're sharing this, so that, this can help one or two followers not make the same mistakes that others did. Then I think we did a good job. Right?
What is the breakdown of your treasury? Is how much of it is in investment tokens and volatile assets versus how much of it is in stable coins?
Just going to our financial reports, because I got it today.
Oh, nice. Great question.
So the split, the treasury allocation split by token. So 10.8% is fiat, 66.3% stable.
Yep.
And then 17.3 in crypto. We can go deeper into that one. And plus 5.7% crypto, but stake into something. So in terms of the cryptocurrencies, we got BTC, Matic, Celo, Stake, ETH. So these are the 5 ones. We only have exposure to tokens in the chains that we're building on.
Right.
So it's kind of like, so obviously Ethereum, because we're building on Celo. Celo is a layer 1, but is now moving to a layer 2, which is very interesting for the Celo ecosystem. And totally, you should interview the Celo founder on how they decided. It's really interesting.
For sure. Yeah.
That story. And Polygon is there. So you're basically vested into, same way people should be vested into other people, projects should be vested into other projects. And that's what we're trying to do.
I can't remember what the percent, I think you said around 30%? 17% was the crypto bucket.
Yeah, 17 plus 5.7 stake.
Plus the stake.
A bit over 20%.
Right. 22. So 20% is a good percentage to have in what would be considered riskier assets. But within that bucket, you're invested in the safest of all of the cryptos, because you're in the largest networked chains that are getting to the point where they might be too big to fail. I mean, there's going to be some that win and some that don't, but you're fairly safe in that. You're not, invested in some riskier cryptos as some people might be. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about revenue and sort of understand your experience of the different revenue models you've tried and how some have worked and some haven't. How when we went into the bear market, I know you've told me that you focused a little bit more on revenue. You went into wartime mode, and maybe did that work or did that not work? What were the lessons learned from that?
Yeah, actually, on that front, there's a really old school veteran book, The Hard Thing About the Hard Things by Horowitz, and it talks about, peacetime CEO, wartime CEO. There's some lessons learned in there. So I think we can put Luna Crash as the moment where we kind of consider, okay, now it's a bear market. I think for a lot of people, it was only when FTX went down that was okay. Now it's really a bear market, but for us, it was when the crash really. Things were already looking sketchy before that, especially since beginning of 2022 when the war in Russia-Ukraine war started. And, but still, I think we can point that date. So before that date, we had the token model I presented before. I told you about before. So people buying talent tokens of talent and getting stake. So we would just be distributing the rewards. In that sense, what we were doing is using incentives, but also selling the token. Okay, so people would be buying the token. In that sense, like our early users are also part of the plan. So again, going back to that mantra of success is collective or should be collective. And that was how we made, I think, $500,000 with that, which goes straight into the community treasury. And there could have been some variations of that, like giving part of it to channels. We're now making new experiments around it, especially since this less new wave of social fi we're learning with Friend Tech and others. And also we will make our move in that direction too in the future. And when Luna crashed, we can make this transition to wartime, right? And again, my first startup in the Web3 space, so maybe I made the mistake of falling back into modus operandi, like a way of work that was more Web2 like. So we started doing things like sponsorships, like I'm not talking about the takeoff program. That's a successful product we got going, but other things, for example, more related to recruitment and stuff like that, which wasn't really our mission at all. Like it wasn't, but I think again, people panic. And a lot of our investors and community members did, including people on the team. I'm not going to say I did, but definitely I was influenced by it. And that influenced us to try experiments in the revenue, making revenue. And we did make some revenue. We do have some fiat, as you can see, we do our treasury as some fiat. Comes from this moment in time this period where we did bunch of experiments. So we did make some revenue, but what we realized is that this was moving our focus away from Web3. We should building platform. We had enough runway. We were lucky to have, because of the move we did and because we were conservative, not extremely optimistic on the space, we had enough runway to keep going. And we still do. We have 24 months of runway, 2 years runway. And we're calling to launch our token next year. So we're going to make more money then. So I think that period of this Web2 revenue testing Web2 revenue models was a mistake. Even though we made some revenue, it was a mistake because it's not like our in bullseye in our mission. And also because it isn't really, then we had a situation where we did our potential client for the future. That obviously we solved the situation and all that, but it wasn't necessary. So just sharing, because it's a situation where you just fall into these traps that appear in your path. And sure, you want to learn from them, but sure, you also do want to do it again. And nowadays, these experiments we're running, like the one I mentioned about the voting for takeoff to select the people who will go to Istanbul that connects them, something that we need to do. Like we need to select the winners. Let's use the token to help us do that. So create a game, talent game around it. And when people bet on the talent and then we give those tokens back, there's also a 10% platform commission that goes back into the treasury. Right? And that those tokens can be reused or eventually in the future, when we have a more decentralized decision-making process, maybe the community can decide to burn them. It's a different way of thinking about business models. So I think I see a lot of times Web3 founders with a Web2 mindset, and I tend to fall back into that mindset. Nowadays, a lot less than before, but still, it's a risk. Not everything about Web2 is bad, but it's a risk when a lot of things, fundamentally, the whole infrastructure, the whole community, the way you do things is totally different. So you need to change also your brain framework and how you do things.
How do you balance that when, particularly right now, when it's tough to grow? Most businesses in the space are not growing right now. We're in this bear market period where we don't have a lot of new people coming into the space. As you said, it's very different than the bull run when everything is turning to gold and everybody wants to jump on everything and spend money. How do you balance that as a founder and a leader? Do your investors give you pressure to make revenue? Does that pull you in a different direction? Like, how do you keep that, sure, you say you have 24 months of runway, but that's not forever. Like, I guess I'm really curious what is it that gives you that like ability to still stick true to these experiments and stick truly
wet night. Do you sleep at night? No, basically, look, actually our investors are great. This is a long run project. I've been like super candid to them about this. Like, we're not building a short term project. We're building in the open source with the community, with you, getting your feedback, experimenting around talents of Web3. So I was always very clear about that. Having said that, there's obviously a pressure to deliver. And it's not only delivering a token, but a token that works. And a token that works needs a proper business model or community model built or wrapped around it. So that's what we're focusing on. As for the runway, definitely not for it. I think we're going to launch next year. And so the launch will also assume some more Treasury or inbound. So some more money inbound. So not too worried about the runway because of that. But yeah, definitely, basically the long term, I think there's like three things that we, the founders, commit to long term. Community. So 1 million community members instead of 5K MAU, 100K monthly active users, so 10%, which is really good. We committed to launching the token, making sure it's successful pre, during, and post token launch. And last but not least, I think the way we're building. So we're building in public, like what I mentioned about our financials, our public information in our Onchain. So we try to be as public as possible. There's some things we can't share for security reasons or stuff like that, like on the token launch. There's some things we definitely can't share, but we try to be as open as possible. And we hope that we can be proud of that we've built and the way that we've built it. So I think the way that we build things is fundamental nowadays, especially in the Web3 space. There's a lot of more eyes on you, but there's a lot more eyes on you for a big reason. And having worked on as a founder in Web2 and Web3, it's very different, but it's very rewarding as well to know we're not doing this alone. We are in this together as a community. It's really interesting to see that. I just want to drop a note on people coming into the space. So something I was very afraid was like, oh damn, in a bear market, everybody's going to go away, because that was the experience from 2017, 18, like the space got emptied, right? And I don't think that happened. So I still see a lot of builders joining Talent Protocol and wanting to learn more about Web3. Maybe, yeah, some chillers, traders the moon boys, as we call them, they went away because liquidity is low.
Yeah,
sure.
That's a good thing.
Come back.
They don't want to.
It's a good thing. They have their own role, I guess. I didn't see a slowdown in the number of builders coming into the space, especially in regions like LATAM, which is one of the regions we're stronger, like Argentina, Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru. Even though Mexico is not part of North America also. Like we have really good culture, product fit with people in these regions. Sometimes, like I live in Europe and we tend to do not appreciate the value, or the way we appreciate the value of Web3 is through opportunity. I think in a lot of these regions, the way they appreciate the value of Web3 or crypto is to need. And what we feel is that our members from these regions, they are a mix of builders. So people, like I said before, finishing university studies, all that. But they also get crypto because there's a lower belief in their financial and political infrastructure, local, which increases the belief in Web3. And so there's a really interesting balance over there. It's harder for us to attract European for what I just said. So we're very focused on LATAM. We've done a bunch of takeoffs. And by the way, there's this secondary goal to a takeoff, which is to get IRL understanding of the local ecosystems. And we did a bunch of them in America, but US, if Denver, DEFCON, Bogota, if Mexico City, if Rio, now if Argentina, and we're learning a lot. We realized that LATAM, there's a really nice fit to what we're building and how we're building it.
Yeah, you make a good point, just going back to what you were saying about the bull versus the bear and who gets washed out in this market. And I just pulled up some stats here and looking at the number of new smart contracts, verified smart contracts launched was at an all-time high last month in August. We hit almost 50,000, 48,000 new smart contracts launched. And that's the highest it's ever been. The previous month, basically, we've been on an upward trend. Every month, even throughout the bear, maybe a little bit of up and down, but mostly, not quite up only, but mostly. And I think, like you said, a lot of certain people, a lot of the volume has been pulled out. A lot of liquidity is pulled out. The speculation is pulled out. But the building is still here.
Yeah, Onchain summer, baby. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, you had a couple other lessons that we didn't touch on throughout this. We talked about legacy at the beginning of the episode. I want to come back to legacy and a couple other lessons that you've shared with me before we started recording around over-raising versus under-raising. Can you touch on those lessons and what those mean to you?
Yeah, regarding legacy, so I don't think it's an exclusive issue to founders. I think it's any human can relate. Something that you've built, something that you've created, you feel emotionally attached to it, right? Again, we're not talking about like dogs or babies, that's a different organic issue. Maybe we're talking about things and products with real use cases, stuff like that. But something that has been ordered me and I would like to share is that it's really hard to let go. For instance, what I was telling before, like we started season 1 with Utility, which, we couldn't see the early signals, or we weren't suspicious enough to go deeper into the data, understand or talk more with our members to understand the why they were buying all that, because we were getting false positives and we couldn't see it. So that helped create even more legacy around that token utility model. And it took us a lot of time to realize, we need to get rid of it. Because it's hard. It's really hard who likes to do that? Nobody likes to admit defeat and let's move on. It's hard. But the thing is, if you don't do it, your mind is not focused on the new things that you should be doing, but also your team isn't. And there's also the maintenance costs. So you still have to maintain old shit that when you should be focusing on new ones. And so it's really something to watch out for. We had like some investors, like really strategic ones, coming through and helping us like get through it and make that transition. Not going to say names, but some interesting, very relevant meetings, some IRL, where the investors and community members, contributors helped me process that. But it's definitely something that we founders, builders should be aware of. Maybe a good thing that can help is if you have a hackathon mindset. It's interesting that if you do that, maybe in some weird way it can help you let go of legacy, because there's always new things. So pushing more from this positive side of things. So I think having this hackathon mindset can help with that. I don't have exactly it's still a theory, but I think it can help. The other thing that you mentioned on over raising versus under raising, again, going back into the bull, ideally you should raise enough if you press it, and have a high enough burn rate so that you then do a follow-up raise, whether you're cash neutral, cash positive, and most of the startups are cash negative, and you should plan accordingly, right? That I still remember one time back in the day, still in the Web2 world, where it was like, hey, we have this plan, we raise now, we have this farm, raising 9 months again or whatever. And then I asked the investor, what if the market changes or doesn't the experiment running, or we don't hit PMF, product market fit, as fast as we want to? And it's like, oh, then I need to have a plan B. It's not so easy to say, right? But it's true, right? So when it comes to fundraising, it's really hard to establish, okay, what's the right moment? I tend to say that you should overraise. I'm on the over-raise side of things, because there's always going to be unexpected stuff. Let's say a money crash or FTX. Those are unexpected moments in the markets that you can't really plan for those. But if you over-raise, it can help you get through it, or at least have a few more months to cope with that. Now, if you over-raise too much, you may compromise if it's Web2 world, your cap table or your token distribution table. And so it's about, in my opinion, you should over-raise a little bit to predict, bad weather days, but you can't do it too much. Otherwise, you'll be destroying your future. In the Web3 space, it's interesting because founders in the Web2 space, it was like two founders just start a company, they split the company in half, right? So the shareholder value is just with the founders, and then investors come in, they start to dilute their equity, all that. But it's always private setting for shareholders. Eventually, there will be employee stock option plan. This thing starts to open up a little bit, and then going public, IPO, which only a few of them do. When you start in Web3, it's completely different. So it would be really weird to start like the token distribution and split with 3 founders, one third for each, and it would make any sense, right? To destroy the economy. Again, your token is not only the tokenomics, it's the utility and how much the community will benefit from it. So things considered, you need to understand the decisions you make on the raise will affect your future. And if you over-raise too much, it might be complex to keep raising. Like if you raise at a valuation that doesn't make sense anymore, then you probably need to do a down round. That's bad for everyone. It's just bad perception, bad everything. So it's really hard to balance things out. But yeah, I think it's interesting to mention this, to the audience, like to be useful for them when they're raising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's the best thing that comes out of that for me is that like, you're not going to get it right. So don't obsess over getting it right or being perfect. As your investor friend said to you, have a plan B, be prepared for the unexpected and take your best shot. The most important thing that any founder or any builder can do is execute, experiment, and move forward. And that is the way that you will, that compounds into success. Success does not come from the first time you write your roadmap or you write your business plan and you nail it and you're like, I can just go next. No, like success comes from that adaptability and that willingness to have a plan B, have a plan C, have a plan D, have a plan F, right? That's the truth for sure. Okay. If people want to get involved in Talent Protocol or Project Takeoff, or if they just want some advice from a fellow founder, how can they get involved in Talent Protocol? How can they reach out to you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, just go on. That's a really easy one. talentprotocol.com, set up your account. I'm in there. My username is PCBO, so 4 letters. And it's really easy to find, and you can message me there. You can support me. If I like your goals, what you're doing, I can support back as well. As for the takeoff, we'll be launching the voting for the new takeoff in Dev Connect Istanbul, and it will be done as a goal. So you set up your goal to attend the takeoff, you automatically you're part of the voting. People can vote for you with the token. So that's the best way to get involved in both of those, definitely. And reaching out to me on Talent Protocol, definitely. Otherwise, Twitter, same 4 letters, PCBO on Twitter, and follow me there.
Awesome. We'll put links in the show notes for everybody. Okay, speed round, couple fun questions just to wrap up. First question, a must-read book that you find yourself either coming back to or recommending to others?
Yeah, I mean, I chose this one based on the context of Web3 Academy and Web3 in general, which is Ministry for the Future. And not like the best book in the world for sure, so I don't want to oversell it here, but I think it's interesting to see what the future could look like, especially with climate change, climate crisis, whatever you want to call it, but also how blockchain and Web3 can help solve that problem too. Identity, having your own identity, your own keys to your identity online, or Onchain in this case, and also having climate-based or climate-driven or planet-driven economy to set it up. The only thing is that on that book, we end up in a world where, I don't want to say up ends, but there's risks to how it is executed. If we use blockchain powered by central players, aka governments, we may end up in a safe planet, but wasted humanity or waste freedom or no freedom. It's really interesting to challenging you to understand what the world looks like, and also how blockchain plays an important role in that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We'll put the link to the book in the show notes. One thing you've bought recently for under $100 that brings you joy.
Yeah, it's joy in the sense of learning, and in the sense of that I was holding back on this for a long time. Actually, I have it here with me, so it's the Atomic Habits. I've read the blog post, but I felt like, okay, I mean, just get it out of my system, and it's good. It's always good to go back and read some stuff that makes sense. I disagree with some of the stuff that James Clear writes, but it's a really good book. And we're talking about achieving goals. I think achieving goals is like, understanding where your goals are, all that's fascinating, but it's also very important, the system of productivity that is built around you. Like, there's an example, like if you have a football teams competing or sports teams competing, obviously their goal is to be number one, right? Or the gold medal, the silver medal, if there's someone that's going to win the gold medal for sure. So some goals are like super straightforward. So it's sometimes like much more about like what's the system productivity that you build around you. That's very interesting to watch. I don't think Talent Protocol tackles that, as in we've built our productivity framework. That's not the point. That's not our goal. But I think we're attacking that by saying, goals can be shared. you can collaborate with other people. I think that's where the book and the framework can be improved. It's all very individual focused. So I just said the review of the book. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no,
it's actually real value.
Yeah, it's great to know what it means to you, and clearly the book has had an impact on you, and it's probably one of the most recommended books. You're not the first guest to mention that book, and you're also not the first. I feel like people talk about that book a lot, and James Clear is an incredible writer. Okay, last question. If you had a billboard that 1 billion people were going to see, what would you write on it?
My mind and heart are split on this one. So my signature catchphrase is "Let's do this."
Mm-hmm.
So it's just positive. It's very actionable, and I think like it would. Okay, let's do this. Can change someone's day, something like that. So, but I realized that maybe too out there for some people. Still, I have another one. So there's this saying like, well, I live in Lisbon in Portugal, so there's this like street tiles that you put on the buildings. We paint the tiles, stuff like that. So I have one at home. The translation to English is like, life is hard if you're soft. And I hope that I can transfer this learning or way of living and being in life in general, where, doesn't mean that if you're soft, life will be hard on you, but it definitely means that the odds of it being harder on you will be higher. And so that's what I hope I can transmit to my kids. Not necessarily like grind. That's not the point. But yeah, that would be the phrase, the life is hard if you're soft. Or like triggers a lot.
You definitely know it's a very triggering line, which would make people think about it, which is the point of a billboard. So
exactly.
You've achieved that. It makes me think of, I watched recently on Netflix, I think it was called Schultz. It's a movie that Jonah Hill made, a documentary with his therapist. The therapist talks about one of his core principles is the reality of work, which basically is that life takes hard work and you cannot get around that. So put on the work boots and show up again and again, because that is the reality of life. And it very much, I agree with your comment. Life is hard if you're soft. So be prepared, because you got to put in the work and keep showing up.
That's it.
Pedro, true pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for your contribution to the space. I hope our listeners will check out Talent Protocol. Every one of our listeners could benefit from taking the time to write down their goals and making themselves accountable. If anyone does do that out of this episode, please let us know in the Web3 Academy Discord. We'll for sure support you and hold you accountable to your goals. And I'm sure Pedro will as well. Pedro, keep on building. We'll have to have you back on the show maybe after the token launch. It would be interesting to do a part 2 at that point.
For sure. No, invite accepted. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. It's always nice to talk about these topics. I mean, we're all on the day-to-day grinding, right? And it's good to just take a step back, think about the past, future.
So important.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for listening, and everybody, have a great day. Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy, your one trusted source to capitalize on the next big phase of the internet. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it and subscribe or follow so that you don't miss the next one. While you're at it, there's a link in the description for our free newsletter where we provide timely and relevant Web3 insights so you can confidently build and invest in Web3. Make sure to subscribe today. One final note. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and nothing we say is financial advice. Crypto and Web3 are risky, and you should never invest more than you're willing to lose. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.